you for joining us live for our MarTech Today webinar. I'm Wendy Almeida from the Content Studio at Third Door Media. Today we'll be talking about how to build a digital foundation to transform your customer experience. I'm very pleased to welcome Keith Barber, the Director of Digital Engagement at Tyson Foods, and Paul Lima, the founder of Lima Consulting Group today. But before we get started, let's go over a few helpful viewing tips. We recommend turning off your pop-up blocker to ensure an optimal viewing experience. On your screen right now, you should see our presentation slides, a Q&A box, and another area featuring our speakers. You can move or resize any of the windows as you prefer. If you run into any viewing issues, use the Q&A box on the left side of your screen to communicate with us so we can assist you. You can also use that same Q&A box to ask questions of our speakers at any time during the presentation. If you want to share this webinar with a friend or learn more about MarTech Today, use the widgets at the bottom of your screen. We're going to be covering a lot of great content today, so don't worry if you miss anything. This broadcast will be made available on demand later this afternoon. You'll receive an email when it's ready for replay. With that business taken care of, let me take a little more time to make a formal introduction of each of our expert speakers today. Keith Barber is the Director of Digital Engagement at Tyson Foods and leading a digital revolution at one of the world's largest food companies. He's a dynamic senior leader specializing in digital customer engagement through technology solutions and content that matters and delivers results. Paul Lima is a trusted advisor to today's leaders charged with creating the digital futures of tomorrow. After finishing his military career at the Pentagon in cyber warfare, Paul founded Lima Consulting Group, a multinational consultancy with offices throughout the Americas. Paul's personal mission is to apply innovation to help organizations transform their digital futures. And now, Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Wendy, for setting this up with the team at MarTech, and also a shout out and thanks to our Adobe for sponsoring today's session. Keith, it's great to partner with you once again. I feel like with all of our Tyson-facing lunch and learns we've been doing recently, we're becoming pros at doing these webinars together.
Yeah, always great to connect, Paul. Although I'm not sure I'd call us webinar pros quite yet, but we're certainly getting our fair share of practice these days.
There's no rest for the wicked. So today's format is a case study mixed with some digital transformation frameworks that Tyson leveraged to accelerate their progress. We'll start by describing the scenario that led Keith to the role that he has, and then the scenario events that led to our meeting. From there, we'll consider the challenges experienced both in the beginning and throughout Tyson's digital transformation initiative. We'll share our approach, reveal some limited outcomes, share lessons learned, and wrap up with your questions. Keith and I are focused on sharing the lessons that we believe can accelerate the progress you may be making within your own organization's similar digital transformation initiatives. And if you like what you see, return to our webinar series on how to engage your digital transformation, where we're going to break down into parts what we did with Keith and show you how to leverage our methodology to break the inertia and accelerate your own transformation. So let's get started. I really enjoy Tom Fishburne's work. If you don't follow him, he's also known as the Marketunist. And before the pandemic, there were a few leaders responsible to digitize the company. Now, everyone's an agent of change. The pandemic promoted the desire to change that was led by the few to an imperative to change typically led by the board and performed by everyone. Over the past few years, many organizations have prioritized short-term digital projects instead of a comprehensive investment in digital transformation. But not Tyson. They were already mid-stride in the journey. Those that get it right will stay the financial impact, reduce risks, and even take market share. The visionaries at Tyson have been hard at work and armed with a multidisciplinary and interdepartmental strategy. It's my assessment that the team at Tyson is well positioned to respond in a deliberate and disciplined approach using a proven digital transformation methodology. So Keith, first, thanks for being willing to be so transparent and share your story today. And before I share some broad industry figures, let's breathe life into all of this by turning first to your personal experience. Perhaps we can start at the beginning. So one of the things that I notice is that many of those that are the digital change agents at companies, both large and small, are assuming a role that's brand new. Did this specific role exist prior, and what were you doing prior to taking on this job?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. I'd say yes and no to that question. You know, previous food service leaders at Tyson had attempted to take on the task of digital transformation, but it was always, a part-time job that they did along with their day job. I was super fortunate, I suppose, because when I took my current role, I really just had to focus on one thing, and that was to, enable digital marketing at Tyson Foods. Now, saying that, I will say that digital meant something different to just about everyone at Tyson. I was also lucky coming into the role as I had worked closely with a couple of leaders that had tried to push digital transformation previously. So I had firsthand knowledge of some of the organizational traps and pitfalls they had faced. My prior role, to your question, had been in sales operations, kind of somewhere between technical marketing and hardline sales. So I had the opportunity to help vet early digital moonshots, as well as lead our awareness and adoption program for a new CRM platform we stood up.
So Keith, it sounds like you were someone who had built consensus with this particular business unit already. And we're going to return to that insight in a few minutes. So how did your previous role play into what you're doing now?
In helping to stand up and select a CRM for the business unit, I learned that we were culturally way behind when it came to anything digital. We didn't have a digital mindset at Tyson or a digital IQ, if you will. But we were digitally curious, especially our executive sales leadership. They clearly saw the opportunity to grab market share that our traditional go-to-market approach could just never do. As such, I knew that if we could build the right value prop and demonstrate how technology delivered cross-functional and multidisciplinary benefits, I could affect digital change. The CRM project was proof to me that we could change.
Given your experience in serving the sellers in the BU, you'd already been responsible to launch, in that particular case, a new technical capability, but it sounded like that was a very tightly scoped project with a single vendor. And so it sets you up well to lead a program that included literally half a dozen new technologies with new agency relationships and new consulting partnerships. So there's an interesting article that came out from McKinsey about the time that we started getting started with this project with you, Keith, and they evaluated 3 types of leaders that senior executives had selected to lead their DX initiatives, DX meaning digital transformation. And then they evaluated the success of the initiatives. And to simplify things, I've given them names. There was first the disruptor, which was a tech entrepreneur or maybe an intrapreneur. So maybe they built and launched an innovative tech or an app or solution elsewhere or from within, meaning the intra, from within the organization. So those would be kind of your disruptors. And then you had the expeditionary. These were former consultants who may have led a number of organizations through the process. And then the third was the connector. And these were proven consensus builders from within the enterprise. And it sounded like you might identify most in that third category?
Definitely.
Yeah. And oddly enough, the findings showed that the best performing initiatives were those that were led by the consensus builders. And it kind of speaks to those people issues that you talked a little bit about. And it doesn't mean that the disruptors and the expeditionaries, the first two, that they can't succeed. It takes a team. But the message is that it's important to recognize the skills that you come into the organization with or into the initiative with, and then to surround yourself with those that can help you along the way.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's go ahead and put digital transformation in a box. How would you define it at Tyson?
Wow, Paul.
Trick question.
I'm going to punt that. Yeah, I'm going to punt on that because we essentially embraced the definition you brought to us. But I would say we knew what it didn't look like. We may not have had the right words, but we knew that it couldn't be all about disrupting our existing business models. We knew that we had to look for ways to do what we already were doing, but in a digital manner.
Yeah. So the consensus builder, right, and take along what's already succeeding. So we define it as the realignment and investment in stuff that starts with the same letter, right, people, process, platforms, and performance, to support business models, both old and new, to Keith's point, that will improve customer engagement at every touch point with the brand. And there's a lot to unpack there around customer engagement and so forth. We won't have time today to do that because I wanted to do less theory and more about Keith's story. So to Keith's point, it's not about coming in and blowing up or disrupting business with standalone digital campaigns or strategies or silos of new subsidiaries designed to cannibalize existing sales. Those words are scary. These initiatives need to be orchestrated across the enterprise. So it's about growing from your roots and your strengths and creating value by engaging your customers through digital channels, all the while using a comprehensive and deliberate and disciplined methodology. So we're going to be setting up our pillars in the slides around our strategy, which we call performance, people, process, and platforms. They're the organizing principles you'll see again throughout the presentation and throughout our model. So let's briefly explore in broad terms the typical challenges that a digital change agent like Keith may face. Let's start with the performance column. What we typically see is that the organization hasn't evaluated how digital transformation can apply to them, and they haven't built the business case. And if it's not viewed as mission critical, it can't be funded. There was an interesting study done in 2018 where Adobe commissioned Forrester Consulting to evaluate the business impact of investing in customer experience across the entire customer lifecycle. And the study showed that organizations that invest in transformation across people, process, and technology, what we're defining as experience-driven businesses, have happier employees and superior business performance. And Forrester's research included a maturity assessment of the survey respondents to identify those who were furthest down the path of customer experience transformation, and only 31% qualified as experience-driven businesses. Moving to the people column, customers expect consistency in how they engage with your brand, no matter the channel. In a recent study of e-consultancy, 84% of customers say that being treated like a person, not a number, 71% of customers say being treated like a person, not a number, is important to winning their business. At the core of what consumers are saying is that they want and expect personalized experiences. These personalized experiences must be in real time and connect at a level with customers that create a bond. And even better said, that creates loyalty. But to do it right, the teams responsible to provide those experiences need to personalize at scale. As organizations adopt one-off solutions, the digital customer experiences don't scale, so they wind up breaking, causing customers to find providers who can provide a, quote, digital-first experience. So go back to that 2018 Forrester study where Forrester found that experience-driven businesses have seen a significant growth in ROI. They grew at 1.4 times faster and increased customer lifetime value 1.6 times more than the average. And lastly, the various technology platforms and internal data silos aren't supporting a unified experience using a unified digital strategy. 84% of customers want a consistent experience across all channels, but only 16% say that they actually get it. So with regard to the challenges, I'm going to rapidly share one typical challenge let's go ahead and advance here. I'm sorry. So Keith, if we look at some of those broad industry statistics that I just shared, how did that compare with the state of affairs as you came into your role?
Everybody and nobody wanted to lead digital transformation at Tyson when I came into my role. So as such, we had a ton of special interest, what I'd call special interest digital projects happening, but none of the work was connected. So for instance, our sales team had discovered that the data feeding CRM wasn't reliable. So they were cleansing customer data, but unaware that marketing and product data was suspect as well. Another group at Tyson had stood up a dam to curate packaging images, and over the course of time now housed all kinds of images, but without a system for tagging and no taxonomy. So you could get it into the dam, but you could never get your content back out. The retail side of our business, and me and my team, we're focused on the food service side. We've got two sides at Tyson, but the retail side had gone out and purchased a PIM that wasn't integrated across our numerous siloed data sources and was being manually upkept for the most part. And on top of all that, we had just completed a really expensive overhaul of TysonFoodservice.com that, while wildly creative, had left us with a really clunky user experience. Bottom line, I'd say, we had a ton of competing interests and nothing pulling things together. Digital transformation at Tyson was going to have to reorganize what we had and then build a forward-looking strategy about where and how to build future technology. But with so many interests throughout the organization, we early on knew we needed a third party to help us set, communicate, and activate our strategy. And in our initial RFP, we looked for a single vendor partner to do it all, a silver bullet, if you will, that could build the strategy, build the tech, build the content for us, and then activate it all. We were presented with 4 to 5 different solutions, but since we weren't aligned yet as a decision-making team, no one could agree on which solution was the right solution. We also, honestly, we didn't know where we were going. Digital transformation at Tyson was still a buzz phrase that really had no meaning or navigational beacons. So that led us to break apart our RFP, and we decided to bring in a third party who could help us build the business case, build a robust strategy, and then help us gain alignment across the enterprise. It's at one point during this stage, I concluded that our single largest barrier to success was our ability to break inertia. We needed a unified vision. I had to find a way to bring clarity to all the stakeholders. So I began the search for the right kind of partner.
Yeah, so in that case, I've got a slide here, the point of debarkation, and this was literally the slide that Keith and I worked on as we created our first SOW.
Yeah, I remember this. So Tyson Food Service, we needed a trusted partner that could guide, advise, validate, and at times support and manage the process of successfully executing a digital transformation initiative. My team was clear that we wanted a plan that was both comprehensive and strategic, but it could also offer short-term quick wins. We had to put, I think I told you early on, Paul, we had to put points on the board. By beginning with that end in mind, we could give our leadership team the ability to plan for both the agility along the journey while vectoring on innovative customer experiences as opportunities to activate quickly were identified. The plan, we knew it had competing objectives of speed and depth, and no one wanted to have 2 separate budgets or 2 separate initiatives. So we needed to be phased in our approach.
Well, this was really a kind of a fun way to get to know you in the very beginning, is that we collaborated literally on this slide to figure out how to balance the deep current objectives, which was to get the digital foundation together, to set, communicate, and operationalize some standards, and then along the way to parachute in quick wins as we found them and identified them. And we wanted to do it all within we didn't want any throwaway work. And if that wasn't enough, senior management had a very specific financial target for you, and consequently for us, And I think that had to do with market share or some revenue numbers. So we knew that we needed to identify and prioritize the right business models and how to associate those initiatives or programs, and then we could begin planning and preparing and funding them. But I think in the beginning, your point's well taken, which was that there was a lot of energy spent on figuring out, what is the vision and how are we going to start vectoring along a trajectory to get to where we want it to. At the same time, we also pointed out that we're doing what we could be doing could have a lot more impact on the existing business than the numbers that were given to us by management. So those initial numbers were a fraction of a fraction, which really had to do with, attributable activity to digital, which is where I was thinking, which was a much different approach, which was how can we impact what you're already doing, right? And those numbers could have been an order and are an order of magnitude greater. So in that regard, we tried to encourage Tyson to think big and to think long term. So let's return to the 4 pillars. Notice that the strategy is first followed closely by the cultural aspects, right? The performance and people in the beginning, the strategy, and then the how dimensions, the process and platform pillars are last because those dimensions begin to line up well if we get the first 2 set up. So these initiatives may or may not begin with the C-suite, but the types of decisions that you're going to need to successfully deploy your first convoys are going to be typically approved there. It's important to do some scenario planning and consider a portfolio of digital futures. For example, how do you want to make money? And do you want to get in the media business like Red Bull did when they built a publishing arm to create a loyal audience who wanted to be, quote, inspired beyond the ordinary? Do you want to become a platform company and provide an ecosystem of capabilities to industry partners? Do you want to accelerate your direct sales model by educating those who buy from you through digital channels? Or maybe scale a low-touch sales model. Perhaps you want to open up new offerings and capabilities or new markets. And how would your business model change if your product became dematerialized? If you could 3D print it, for example. If I was looking for shock impact at Tyson, I got it by talking about 3D printing chicken.
Yeah, I'm still not all the way there, Paul.
I'm with you. So it's for effect. So consider how Volvo started making engines and how far they've come, because now it's possible to subscribe to your Volvo. Or how would you respond if an aggregator entered your industry? An aggregator creates a marketplace of providers and sells their services under their own brand. So like Uber and Airbnb are aggregators. Is there a play with selling audience? How would you monetize or license data with your second parties or your partners? And how would crowdsourcing and blockchain or 3D printing or other innovations impact your business over the short term, the midterm, the long term? So long term meaning about 5 years out, and then the future term meaning 10 years out. And that's where we talk about, 3D printing. So we maintain a list of about 24 business models here at Lima, and we help our customers select a smaller portfolio of those and then run some scenarios against each. And getting consensus on that model is difficult. So to drive that to a decision, we use a tool that we've adapted from a tried and true method called the balanced scorecard. We call it, we modified it, it's called a digital balanced scorecard. We've learned that the most difficult and most common challenges are the strategy alignment and then the people issues, those first 2 columns. So it's hard to get organizations to reach across silos. In some cases, digital is bringing together parts of the organization that have never had a reason to work together. These were entirely new muscles and relationships inside established lines of reporting that sometimes have to be redrawn or connected for the first time. And if that's not enough, how do you handle a Darth Vader, which inevitably is going to happen within an organization whose primary concern is maybe to grow their empire or their headcount or their budget at the expense of the team? So digital transformation is going to touch culture. It'll reframe attitudes about failure. It'll bring emerging leaders to the forefront, and it will accelerate the organization's ability to promote consensus builders and visionaries. So when it comes to the last 2, let's go to processes. Leaders need to document existing processes before they digitize and automate them. What you don't want to do is to attempt to digitize a suboptimal process, or even worse, automate a process that will create more work downstream. You'll need a multidisciplinary team to leverage the power of technology investments you've already made or that you plan to make. And then finally, the platforms. Choose platforms from the beginning that will accelerate your agility tomorrow. That generally means selecting platforms that work with your existing tech stack while also laying a deliberate data layer so you can easily spin up additional tech. It's important to begin with the end in mind. So aligning capabilities with the way you do business today and then build additional business models from there is the approach that we normally take. We want to align key business objectives so that your KPIs can flow from your key business objectives, your KBOs. If you're making decisions using data, you may be asking for a cultural shift to adopt a data-driven operating model. So, if the force was strong with Luke Skywalker, would it be safe to say that the inertia was strong with Tyson? So, Keith, why do you think it was important for Tyson to change, and what did you all want to accomplish at the outset?
Yeah, this was probably the easiest question to answer because at Tyson it was all about the opportunity. Our sales and broker teams do an incredible job of managing customer relationships and selling into about 15,000 operators across the U.S. And think about, these are the largest restaurants, schools, universities, hospitals, hotel chains. The challenge to that is, though, that there's 1.4 million operators in the U.S., with the vast majority being small volume operations that honestly don't make economic sense for Tyson to stop a car and call on them. These operators, we call them the unattended operators because they purchase their products through a network of food distributors like the Cisco's, the US Foods, and others. And while we sell products to these distributors, we really don't know who the end customer is as those products pass through that distribution network. Anyone who manufactures a product or sells through a distributor probably feels the same pain. Some other industries that we studied, Paul, when we were building out our strategy that are similar and have the same sort of problems. Or automotive comes to mind, chemical, pharma, high tech, even some similar use cases we found in government, nonprofit, and the financial services sectors. We knew we wanted to reach our unattended operator audience, and we wanted to own the conversation rather than leaving it to the distributor. We wanted to have a stronger control and influence over the unattended operator's path to purchase. Paul, you and the team at Lima, the thing I'll tell everybody is you all listened, which was key. Our situation, like most, had some unique problems to solve. The solution that was implemented with your last customer wasn't going to work piece for piece at Tyson, and you guys clearly understood that. So with Lima's help, we began to build out a 3-year strategy and roadmap. We knew in year one we wanted to build a digital foundation. We wanted to introduce core technologies that met the current need state and could scale with us. Year two, as we're moving into, we want to be able to develop a better understanding of our customer. And then in the third year, we'll want to accelerate our customer experiences so that they're all data-driven and so that we can take advantage of content at scale and personalize our customer experience. Lima also helped us introduce the concept of an imperative to change. Paul, you've probably heard me say it too many times. This concept always gives me a bit of heartburn, right?
Yeah.
Because honestly, I'm not sure if a year and a half ago I polled our senior executives, they would have said we needed to change. I think there was a desire to change someday, but maybe not now. And we really underestimated the need to build a business case to show what happens if we don't change, and to show the upside that comes along with change. So, Paul, you and your team helped us build out some scenarios. We called them baseball cards, you'll remember, of what could happen if we did change, and it really helped make it tangible and got our senior executives on board.
You know, I think that's one of the key takeaways from today's dialogue, Keith. I mean, you referenced that the solution that we found together with your team was unique to Tyson. And while the outcomes, those deliverables, they were certainly unique, no doubt. But the steps we took to get there were actually leveraged from a pretty well-established framework, and one that we've built on top of and mixed with some newer ones. So our model really got its start from a traditional gap analysis engagement, traditionally used by enterprise IT. And over the years, we've layered on steps that are critical in conducting transformative investments. So the second and third steps needed to be elevated from being merely a deliverable to major milestones along the methodology: vision formulation, future state business objectives. The learning there was in many engagements, we would get all the way to execution before fissures in the organization began to manifest. The way that they would present themselves would be that you'd have an EVP, or maybe an above level from an EVP executive, C-level, step forward with various or even worse competing visions about the most fundamental assumptions made at the point of conception of the project. So I mentioned these earlier under the performance column earlier. Questions like, how do we want to make money versus how are we making money? Who's our customer today versus who do we want to serve? How do we provide value today versus how are we providing it? How do we want to provide it in the future? What's our unique value proposition today and what will it be in the future? Or what's our strategy and operating business model and what do we want it to be in the future? So this notion about creating digital futures, which is kind of our tagline, it really hits home in this first pillar here of performance, which is, you know, the way that we go about doing the strategy work. So once we get through the scenario planning and the assessment of the data readiness within the organization, we're positioned to go to the mountaintop and dream together and complete the vision formulation. And with the vector against the roadmap, we're able to identify what success ought to look like. And that's what we call those future state objectives. And the outcome there is the digital balance scorecard. I can't emphasize how important that is because it's a demonstrable, simple, easy to share tool to align everyone. It's amazing to me how many organizations don't have it documented. And the strategy has slivers of it within over 100 documents, or maybe in a lot of people's minds, or maybe in pictures across glitzy PowerPoints. But it's not aligned, it's not documented. And it's not widely put on a 40-foot banner flag that the digital change agents can run onto the stadium field to rally the vision. And that deliverable is a key milestone along the beginning of the journey. And if you do it, it will save the digital transformation visionary, who's the person responsible, a lot of time when balancing competing expectations that are sure to pop up down the line. Then we do the gap analysis and come up with the roadmap for the 4 pillars. And then from there, one of the surprising lessons I've learned over the years is among all the steps, when we do our after-action reviews with our customers on the engagement, this decision and approval step is the one that consistently pops up as the point where LCG provided the most value. And that insight really surprised me. All of the work done to that point, you would think, would be evident to everyone in the organization, but the consensus building to fund it, it's not as obvious to everyone who hasn't been a part of the initiative. Having a third party help to educate, to do the lunch and learns, and that time to play arbitrator and even referee between senior leaders that are wrestling for control over budgets or headcount. Well, it's just not where I would have landed if I had to guess, which is the most valuable step myself. So Keith, let's explore, we've just covered theoretically what the process looked like. How did the process look like at Tyson?
Yeah, I think building out that process and building out the scenario planning and strategy work, this was probably the tightest partnership along the entire path where the Lima team brought so much value. We did some scenario planning and ultimately decided on a 3-pillar strategy. And in and of itself, the 3 pillars were pretty exciting. You know, one, we knew we needed to develop great content to capture new audiences in new ways. Two, we wanted to introduce marketing technology that could power lead generation, lead nurture, to set up customer data capture and provide better decisioning through better analytics. And then third, we wanted to be able to activate all that rich data to accelerate the things that our teams were already doing. And I think this is where things got exciting for me, because each one of those pillars stood on its own, and we could have built objectives and initiatives around it as a standalone. But the cool thing that we learned as we started to really put plans against the pillars is that each point in the overlap, like a Venn diagram, if you will, the points of intersection also provided this host of rich ideas. Everything just kind of clicked together in terms of the strategy. You know, I do these drive-by meetings, which are typical of the Tyson culture, as you're trying to work and gain alignment to build consensus and inform key stakeholders. And what we saw there were a lot more depth to a strategy that we could have only realized with the help of all the various departments and leaders. That's when we knew we had a solid strategy and that we could definitely get it funded and move forward. You know, the two other things that I'd say about the process, you've got to have a partner you can trust in the boat with you. The team at Lima did 65 stakeholder interviews during discovery, which, you know, if I'm honest, at the time felt like way overkill. But you know, Paul, you kept coming back saying you needed more latitude. Gosh, that work and investment has proved to be such a key factor for success later in the process. You know, I didn't know it at the time, but being overly inclusive in the discovery saved us tons of time when it was time to gain consensus and ask people for money. And then, you know, finally, I'd say, related to the process, don't underestimate your role as the internal partner in this, your role as a translator. Lima did an incredible job helping us through discovery and building out a strategy, but they didn't speak Tyson. They spoke, I guess, Lima. So it was my job, my role to take the work and tailor it to the internal Tyson audience so we could really go out and affect change.
I'm so grateful that you are our translator on the journey and to make it real at Tyson. So I'm going to introduce the digital transformation maturity model in record time because the focus is on how Tyson used it and not necessarily the model itself. So we typically cover down on the digital transformation model by explaining how data can give you insights along the x-axis. Then we look at the internal processes used to activate those insights. So the x-axis is how we're using data. It's how we're getting smart. It's around consumer insights. And to evaluate that, we conduct a data readiness assessment and place Tyson on the x-axis. I see a question in the chat about what is unhealthy data. I'm going to answer that in just a minute. And then the y-axis takes data, it processes it into information, and enables marketers and sellers to create meaningful relationships and digital experiences. So it's your getting return axis, your agility posture. So the way to read this chart is to begin by finding the column that matches your organization's data readiness posture, typically the first one, the descriptive stage. And as you rise from the bottom to the top of that column, machines are helping you perform those tasks until you cross the frontier of automation. Tasks done below the line are done by computers, and those above the line by those of us in the workforce. So as we continue to move to the right of the x-axis, in terms of how you're using data, your ability to use automation will also advance. Note that the curve of automation is exponential. The intersection points along the curve of automation are very carefully crafted in our model. And while we won't have time today to review each of those intersection nodes that touch the curve of automation, they each represent an inflection point of how technology can be used to take on more scale and help you grow. If anything, this chart really makes the business case to lay a strong digital foundation at the beginning so that you can benefit from the exponential power of automation towards the end. The later stages accelerate fast, but the first two stages take discipline and commitment of the initiative, and it's likely to span many parts of the enterprise and take some time. You got to have some patience. In the beginning of the journey, teams spend a great deal of effort gathering, cleansing, prepping the data for routine ad hoc reporting. And if you sit down and talk to the frontline practitioners, the sellers, the marketers, the analysts, they'll tell you that they spend more energy gathering and cleaning data than analyzing it. And that's pretty normal. There are symptoms and patterns across the other phases of the x-axis, but for today, we're going to focus just on the descriptive phase. In this phase, the frontier of the curve of automation is really only helping out with the first few tasks around data gathering and reporting. Everything else north of the curve is done by people. So once the reports are assembled, it typically takes months to assess decisions, and that's usually done by building consensus among key stakeholders. From there, the marketing or sales actions such as campaigns or promotions can kick off. As you advance in the model, months turn to weeks in the second column, weeks to days in the third column, days to hours in the fourth, and hours to milliseconds in the fifth. So you can start moving in the last few columns. You skip orders of magnitude in terms of speed. In our ongoing webinar series for digital leaders, What to Do in Your First 90 Days, we're hosting a virtual roundtable to cover the rest of this model and promote smaller group discussions that are intimate with those leaders in those calls to share best practices with our team facilitating those discussions. So in this first stage, the descriptive, it's fair to say that when there's a portfolio of opinions that are on the table, the person with the highest rank prevails. All opinions aren't equal in this first stage. See, after the decision brief, the HIPPO, or the highest paid person's opinion, announces the decision, at which point the action can be funded and implemented. Keith, did you guys ever feel this way?
Oh man, all the time, right? At a certain point in our own process, we looked at our internal stakeholders across the table, and we realized we hadn't brought some of the organization along with us. The things that started off as buzzwords had become items that I was now asking them to finance. The deliverables we got from the team at Lima were structured in a way that the digital change agents could have confidence to advance our culture of the organization to allow for opinions from anywhere in the organization to be heard, not just the HIPPO that you referred to. I was literally able to point to the roadmap, that curve of automation, and show executives exactly where we are in the curve and what that technology roadmap looks like. That's a super powerful tool that can defend you and help you slow down the silver bullet ideas, we call them, the ones that are brought to you by the well-intentioned coworker who just went to a tech trade show and wants immediate deployment of the latest gadget they saw.
Yeah, that's even more difficult when the well-meaning coworker has a title that starts with C, or a senior person, right?
Yes, indeed.
As you complete the second stage, I guess there's this takeaway where we talk about something that Dr. Edward Deming said, and he said, "In God we trust. All others bring data." And Dr. Deming developed that phrase, not necessarily for the all-powerful executive to mandate to his underlings or their underlings. He wrote it to admonish senior executives. See, when I was in the Army, it's what I learned when the generals were out in the field. They were more interested in speaking with the folks in the trenches whose fingernails were dirty to capture the pulse of the battle rhythm. Ideas should be able to come from anywhere, and it means senior executives need to also embrace a data-driven operating model and check their ego at the door. So at the end of 2022, if Tyson follows the plan, you can expect to have a digital foundation that's aligned with your data readiness posture. And I want to stress that this chart is not the actual chart for Tyson, but the idea here is to only prepare your data up to the point that you intend to activate it. And we evaluate it on 12 dimensions. We don't have time to go over that here, but the plan here is to invest in data only in support of your business objectives. So this isn't an academic journey to collect data for data's sake. We need to align the effort of data readiness with your desired outcomes. So that's why you don't need to be a perfect 10 on all dimensions. After we're able to really map out the data readiness posture, how did that go over with the organization at Tyson, Keith?
Yeah, it illustrated how we were at the beginning. It helped me tell the story that we needed to fund data-centric initiatives. We had a lot of data, but all rested in silos. We had data with partners that we wanted to bring in-house, and we identified other partnerships that we wanted to invest in and to be able to leverage in the future. So by using a disciplined model like this, we have confidence that our investments, the changes I'm asking people to make, are all aligned with our ability to operationalize the desired digital vision and strategy. It also helps me ask for the organizational patience that we're going to need to get this right, because these are new capabilities. We're standing up master data modeling for new areas, and it's going to take time to align the roles and responsibilities between who enters data, who owns data, and who gets to use the data. It's the next big hill we're going to climb in this journey, for sure.
Yeah, and it's a big one. So that's what we're focused on now. Let's go ahead and, Keith, I'm going to ask you to just share briefly where you landed with the strategy and what did that look like in your drive-bys as you internally presented it.
Yeah, the closed loop plan, we call it, right? For us, it's really going to start with a robust social presence that we tie to a new engagement hub that'll be much more customer-centric and focused around the conversation that operators in food service want to have. So really moving beyond just product and brand that a typical brand hub might have. We really want to engage pre-click suspects and pull prospects into a well-designed sales funnel. Then through marketing automation capabilities that we're implementing that'll connect to our own CRM solution, we want to power behavior scoring and identify targeting and retargeting opportunities. By year 2, we think we'll be able to analyze customer lifetime value in our key commercial segments. Digital media investment will be attributed to specific offers and rebates with line of sight to redemption behavior. We're actually going to be able to calculate digital marketing's contribution to sales. Today at Tyson, marketing and sales can't do that.
Yeah, that's a big step there. I just briefly wanted to share the MarTech stack. I know from MarTech today, they've got the Stacky Awards and kind of a salute to the great work that's done there. This is Tyson's MarTech stack. What lessons did you learn as we went through the MarTech stack and identified it together?
Yeah, I think we built out a great stack. It changed very little from the outset. Every recommendation we made internally is being funded and activated. That's not normal to Tyson, right? There's usually a lot of gauntlets from other departments to review and modify and I'm making air quotes, add value, right? We didn't have to deviate because it was a solid strategy. I presented it to everyone in big settings and small one-on-one settings, and throughout those briefings, whether it was IT, legal, procurement, finance, sales, marketing, product managers, it held strong. It was a solid strategy.
Yeah, so why did it stick?
Great question. I think the one-size-doesn't-fit-all approach, probably. You know, the recommendations your team, Paul, at Lima did were right-sized for Tyson. They met that need in the short term, but we knew they would work with all our, you know, the fact that you knew that you were going to have to clear a cybersecurity review, a legal review, architectural tech review. You helped us choose the right partners, the right technical partners that would be able to help us future-proof our MarTech stack, especially in our decision to platform with Adobe. You know, we wanted, from the very beginning, we told you we wanted proven, scalable platforms that would grow with us.
Yeah, and that was hard because we had some short-term deliverables and we had some long-term things that we wanted to do. So this is an example of the baseball cards. I see a question about whether or not we build them by persona. This particular example of a baseball card is for software. It includes the implementation, if you need it, the managed services, training, the events so that you can make sure that you budget to go to the annual events for each of your technology vendors, and even the budget for your full-time equivalents or your internal resources. And we'll build these out generally over a 3 to a 5 year period. So we've hidden the dates and the financials, but you get the point that each technology has a comprehensive view, and that helps put it all together across the MarTech stack in terms of the people, the processes, and the platforms. So as part of our methodology, we built a software system we use to quickly do the scenario planning and align interdependencies of all of the MarTech stacks and all the 4 pillars. This system allows us to align each software to a principal theme, which we'll find when we do our stakeholder interviews. At Tyson, we found 7 that are unique to Tyson. We'll build out the digital balance scorecard and align each technology to one of the KBOs there, and then the KPI for that technology. We'll align the technology to a department or to a leader, and then from there we're able to do a lot of scenario planning that accelerates the decision making. So these baseball cards were for tech. We have other baseball cards for campaigns, and those can be persona based, to answer the question. So back to you, Keith. How did these baseball cards help throughout the process? Keith, did I lose you?
Sorry, Paul. I finally did it and left myself on mute.
No worries.
Your question on the baseball cards, you know, we leaned on your team and these cards a lot. You know, as we'd ask you to turn the crank one more time with a different scenario, depending on budget or depending on different use cases or different areas we wanted to explore that presented different requirements. The tool with the baseball cards helped us see what would happen if we moved budgets to IT or if we pushed our start dates out, with all the other software solutions that relied on that, you know, one being completed. So the interdependencies really made fast turnaround and a great customer experience for us.
That's great. So in the interest of time, I'm going to ask us to go to slide 23. And I had Keith talk a little bit about what he wanted from the tech stack. Let's go ahead and advance to slide 23, which will to the Marketo Engage with Adobe Analytics. So these we kind of talked about the need to integrate the profiles. So in terms of activating the strategy, you know, Tyson did a formal RFP and selected Marketo, which is a marketing automation platform well known for delivering experiences throughout the entire customer lifecycle. It has its own data layer and largely gets its data from CRM Sync and behavioral data from Adobe Analytics. And that means lead scoring can include both online engagement powered by Adobe Analytics and offline behavior powered by CRM. It has a robust design studio to develop templates for email, landing pages, and forms. It has a reporting engine built for B2B attribution. And lastly, there's a remarketing and retargeting capability with Visible. So that gives you the initial the technical architecture, both at a high level with the MarTech stack, and as well as a more detailed view of what we recommended with Tyson. All right. So we recommended a platform with Adobe at the core and several other MarTech tools. In total, there were 6. That would be both easy to use, but that also keep the pace of innovation as Tyson's needs matured. For their use case, we knew Marketo's maturity continuum for marketing automation would line up well with the future scenarios that Tyson had envisioned. In the beginning, Tyson needed a solution that would integrate CRM with ERP, but given the challenges in collecting data, we also needed a central repository for being able to do lead scoring and retargeting in the future. We think that in the future, tools like the Adobe Customer Data Platform may help Tyson further leverage data in support of their key business objectives. So as we come to a close, one of the takeaways I've learned from you, Keith, is just how intertwined each pillar of our model is with the next. And this has really been a multidisciplinary journey, and it's been an honor to work with you so far. In getting the strategy down, we really needed to button up the documents around the business model definition. We talked a lot about the digital balance scorecard, and we learned how critical it was to bring the rest of the organization along. So the dialogue around the communications planning and the 8 lunch and learns that we're doing is well underway. And then from there, we enable the team to have the leverage they needed to be able to ask subject matter experts in other departments to document the value-driving processes that we, or in some cases they, wanted to digitize. And because we built that consensus along the stakeholder interviews, when we started, it was easier to ask different departments to get on board and enter their data in CRM. And then the easiest part, relatively speaking, was actually the technology. So Keith, how about you? How would you sum up the journey so far?
You know, our challenge was and is our ability to reach and influence a massive number of potential customers by using, new digital tools. And while our approach to tech, as you mentioned, Paul, is foundational and certainly not earth-shaking to this point, building the right strategy and shifting the Tyson culture has turned out to be key. Now I'm confident we have the right plan, the right tech, and the right culture to deliver a great customer experience through digital. If I could, to close, I'd leave this audience with some key learnings that I've had along the way. First, get help defining the problem or problems that your organization may have. Understand what you're really trying to solve for, because I would say that that problem statement shifted with the help of Lima. Second, get honest about where your organization is on the curve of automation. We felt pretty good as an organization that we had a CRM system when Lima came on board, and felt like we were digital. We certainly, CRM is a great advancement, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're reaching those unattended operators. Third, I'd say look for partners that'll truly listen to your organizational needs and check their egos at the door. You really need somebody along for the journey that is willing to flex their approach. And then, last, I just say it again, be prepared to translate strategies, initiatives, plans into your corporate speak. It makes all the difference in the world.
All right. Well, Keith, thank you so much for your transparency and candor today. And I guess I would ask the audience, how do you know if you're ready to start the journey or if you may need an advisor? And I would say if you need to convert or recruit more visionaries or departments to change the culture, to gain consensus, to balance quick wins with the long-term vision, or to elevate siloed projects to a DX initiative, you may have your packing list together and you'll be off to a strong start. So to break down more best practices, download our ebook, How to Be a Digital Transformation Leader in 90 Days. This is the cheat sheet from the back of the book. Remember that before the crisis, people with the word digital in their titles were leading digital transformation. Now everyone is. So we hope that the lessons shared today will accelerate your own journeys. So Wendy, that concludes our prepared remarks.
Great. Thanks again, Keith and Paul, for the really insightful presentation today. I would like to let our audience know that our speakers will be hosting a roundtable on June 18th to discuss the principles in their newly published ebook, How to Be a Digital Transformation Leader in 90 Days. And that's a jumping off point to an informal discussion during the event. You can sign up for the virtual roundtable through a link in our follow-up email from this event, as well as the PDF version of this slide deck that will be attached to that email. I want to thank again Keith and Paul. We don't have any. Paul answered several of the questions that the audience came through in our Q&A during the presentation, but there are quite a few more that we don't have time to get to today. So we'll be sure to share all those questions with our speakers so that they can get back to you after the presentation. On behalf of MarTech Today, I want to thank everyone in our audience for attending this webinar, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.